In 2020, I reviewed the Bittboy PocketGo V2.1. For the price, it was a pretty good value and was vaguely styled like a Super Famicom, but was not really packing the latest hardware inside and had a few issues. Fast forward to 2021, and Bittboy has shipped the PocketGo S30, its latest and greatest handheld. Does it compete with the ODROID and the Anbernic? Similar to last year's model, the S30 borrows heavily from the Super Nintendo. From the colors to the buttons to the shape, this is very much an SNES controller with a screen built in. The screen is 480 by 320 and has some of the smallest bezels I've seen in a handheld. It's bright, it's colorful, and it does get reasonably dark, though for many retro games, 480 by 320 isn't the optimal resolution. Still, it's the same as in the RG351, ODROID, RK2020, and others, so it's par for the course. 800 by 480 would have been more ideal. The buttons and D-pad are a little small, and the L2 and R2 buttons are digital, but they feel like they should have been analog triggers. But overall, it's a good experience, and they don't really need the breaking in like last year's model. The joystick is thankfully upgraded, moving to the same mechanism as the RG350M, the Subor Q400, etc. On top, there is a USB-C, which does not support fast charging, a power button, which doubles as the menu button, and volume buttons. Below, we have two indicator lights, a 3.5mm headphone jack, micro SD card slot, and sadly, a mono speaker. Note this speaker is wired as a single channel and not left and right mixed together, so if your game plays music differently for each channel, it may sound wrong. Overall, the build quality is a step up from the PocketGo V2, but Bittboy stuck with the digital volume buttons again, which feels imprecise and you can't hold the button down in order to quickly change the volume. The screen brightness can only be changed from the main menu, and it's not really as comfortable as an 8-bit Do controller. Software is something of a mixed bag. The main interface is nicely themed, and there is quite a few games included on the model I received, but what is most noticeable is the lack of options. The settings has literally two options, language and backlight. Emulators are equally as bare, with some only offering save states, and that's it. Display modes, controller settings, frame skip, etc. are all missing on several of these emulators. A few emulators are also clearly designed for other machines as they appear stretched and scaled from a lower resolution. There are also no freeware and open source games to speak of, and no additional emulators as of now. Game Boy, Game Boy Color, GBA, Wonderswan, Neo-Geo Pocket, MAME, FBA, NES, SNES, Mega Drive, PC Engine, PS1, PSP, and Dreamcast. That's it. No N64, no Master System, DS, MSX, Game Gear, or Saturn. It probably wouldn't play N64 or Saturn well, so those aren't really big losses, but all the others should be playable. Software is something that is user replaceable, so you may be able to prove this over time, but so far I haven't seen any community firmwares. Performance is actually a bright spot, but there are some caveats. The console uses an all-winner A33 quad-core processor, a $5 chip from 2014, but compared to the JZ4770, it's quite the upgrade. This does mean that anything that ran well in the last generation, namely NES through PS1, runs fine here. The higher resolution also lets you try out PSP games, and with some frame skip and maybe some tweaked settings, they actually run pretty well. Dreamcast is where we get a little outside the limits of this device. The S30 came with Sonic Adventure 2 installed, but it runs pretty slow and at a poor frame rate. Compared to an ODROID, which is also a quad-core chip, but with the much newer architecture, it struggles to keep up, though even the ODROID isn't flawless. What really hurts some games, though, is the software. Games like Street Fighter 3 should run just fine on an S30, and it does hit full speed, but for some reason it's stuck with frame skip turned on. The emulator menu offers no solutions, so this might be something you have to live with until we get an update, or if you're brave enough to go into the file menu. Luckily, the whole SD card is formatted as FAT32, which does make adding ROMs or perusing the file structure one of the easiest of all the handhelds. Just pop the micro SD card into a reader and drag the files over, and yeah, that's it, no software required. This does make the handheld easier to use, though FAT32 can corrupt when not properly ejected, and the S30 surprisingly doesn't have a shutdown function. With all that said, I pre-ordered this handheld for $60. That's $10 less than its predecessor, and it makes it one of the cheapest options available with a quad-core chip. It plays a whole lot of games, has 4 to 5 hours of battery life, handles well, and definitely looks the part of a retro console. Currently, the worst part of this handheld is the software. The PocketGo V2 had pretty good community support by nature of it being almost identical to the RG350, but since the RG351 has a different chipset, I wouldn't expect as many firmware options. It's a shame too, since other than the mono speaker, it does a lot of things right. Hopefully Bittboy leads the way and releases new firmware soon, but until then, you might want to wait on this one.